Good afternoon. The Commonwealth is in a state of emergency. The Delta variant is spreading at a rate never seen before, impacting businesses, shuttering schools, and worse, causing severe illness and death. Nearly every day, we set records in the number of Kentuckians hospitalized in the ICU or needing a ventilator just to breathe. In previous surges, the governor, me, was empowered to act, to do what is necessary to stop the spike, to flatten the curve, to save lives. But a recent state Supreme Court decision has changed that. Now, that burden will fall in large part on the General Assembly. They'll have to carry much of that weight to confront unpopular choices and to make decisions that balance many things, including the lives and the possible deaths of our citizens. Beginning the day after that decision, my administration and me personally began calls with and meetings with legislative leadership. We mutually agreed to take a little bit of time with the status quo intact for them to determine next steps. I think that was a good first decision. It showed thoughtfulness over simply reaction. We've met multiple times. We have had multiple calls. We've exchanged information and even potential draft legislation. At this point, and with the deadline approaching where our declared state of emergency would end and many of our tools that are so necessary to fight this pandemic would evaporate, now is the time to act. So today, I'll be signing the official call for the General Assembly to meet in special session beginning 10 a.m. on Tuesday morning. As with every special session, it is limited to the call itself. Under the call, the General Assembly will be asked to extend the state of emergency to January 15th. That's when they would be back again and be able to have time to act. It'll ask them to review executive orders and agency and cabinet orders. It'll ask them to determine my ability to require masking in certain situations, depending on where the pandemic goes and how bad any area is. It'll ask them to appropriate funding to further the fight, funding that is left over from the American Rescue Plan Act dollars that were not needed for certain things they were appropriated for. They'll be asked to provide our schools with flexibility. So this session will be about COVID, about the General Assembly under the Supreme Court's decision, making determinations on this fight moving forward, and it is a heavy load to carry. There are a few other things, since we will have the legislature in town, that are also on the call. Number one is to extend the state of emergency in Nicholas County for the flooding in Carlisle for 30 to 45 days. That is just in case. We need to do some extra steps as that flooding has been particularly bad, and things like temporary housing have been requested for longer. It also asks the General Assembly to provide the Cabinet for Economic Development with additional flexibility for projects over $2 billion of investment. We have never operationalized a project of that size. I think there's only been one that had a package approved, and it never happened. But as we sit here today, we have at least 5 potential projects that would be that size. In other words, the largest in our Commonwealth's history. But other states have tools in their toolbox to make offers for those projects that we don't have. And so this asks the General Assembly to help us be competitive, but to keep the same spirit we have in our current incentive package. It also would give us flexibility on the Glendale site, which is Kentucky's mega site, to move fast if needed, simply because it is in demand. So at this moment, I will be signing the proclamation that will officially call the legislature into special session beginning 10 a.m., which is, I believe, when the House will convene on this coming Tuesday. All right, we will be sending out the call itself, which I think is fairly routine, but certainly points out how bad COVID has gotten, and also going through the different things to be considered in the special session. All right, with that, we'll turn it over to a number of reporters that we have on the line. We'll start with Morgan Watkins from the Courier-Journal.
Thanks, Governor. You said one of the goals of the legislative session will be to determine your ability to require masking in certain situations. Do you have any sense from your talks with legislative leaders to what degree, if any, they'll be willing to give you that kind of power, and if it'll be looking more at regionally, being able to put it in place in specific regions of the state as opposed to a statewide ban or requirement?
Well, we've had generally very good talks with the General Assembly. People have been open and been willing to have conversations. I know this is one that will be a contentious issue within the caucus or within the General Assembly itself. I have stated very clearly that I believe that this authority is absolutely necessary, as we would not have been able to stop the previous surges without using it. We would not have been able to flatten the curve without the ability to require masking. Remember that kept our emergency rooms and our hospitals from overflowing and being overrun before. But we're already to that stage now. So I think that it's necessary. If they won't consider providing that authority in general, my hope is that they will consider a threshold to where they will provide me that authority. In other words, if the local government can keep the levels low in the green or even in the yellow, then maybe they would make that determination. But when it gets to orange or especially red, sometimes it's easier to make the call here than what some other people might face, but it's still the right call. But no, I don't know exactly what the final outcome there will be. But I certainly hope, given that we know it is an effective tool that is hard to implement without the governor, that they will give it significant consideration. Tom Latek from Kentucky Today. I know you're on here, Tom.
Yep,
we can't have a press conference without you. There you are.
I was having a little difficulty unmuting. Sorry about that. I've got two quick ones. First of all, if you could explain what the Glendale site is, I'm not sure of that. And then secondly, there's been a lot of discussion over the last week or so about NTI, the flexibility to do it on not just a district level, but as a little tighter, say like a school level or even a classroom level. Is that something that's going to be part of your call or part of your proposal?
Sure. So the Glendale site is a mega site off I-65. It's one that is very attractive just across the country, and that's one that we have to get some things done if we have opportunity to be able to move fast. NTI, I think there are a number of things on the table. Number one is absolutely right. Flexibility in using your NTI days, not on the district level, because that's the only thing you can do right now. You got to have the entire district out to use NTI. Moving that down to the school or the classroom level, I know is something that's going to be considered and that people have an open mind of. I think there's additional consideration for whether it's additional NTI days or maybe something a little more limited and or structured, depending on how you look at it, like remote instruction or virtual instruction, just making sure the kids are getting a full day in. I think there is also consideration, and you'll see it in the call, about flexibility in allowing retired teachers to come back, especially during this crisis, and help us to make sure we don't have any classroom that doesn't have an instructor. Jeremy Toombs from KYT.
Yeah, thank you, Governor. In terms of, you had mentioned your ability to require masking in certain situations. With the way the Delta variant has been of late, what situations are you particularly looking at?
Well, it'll be up to the General Assembly. I mean, that's what the Supreme Court has said. Right now, we need it everywhere. We have more cases per week than we've ever seen. We have a higher positivity rate than we've ever seen. We have more people in the hospital than we've ever seen. We have more people in the ICU than we've ever seen. We have more people in the ICU than we've ever seen. And my worry is that we will have more deaths in a short period of time than we've ever seen. Now, two things can get us out of that. One's the long-term solution, vaccines, and one's the short-term solution to flattening the curve a little and giving us extra healthcare capacity, and that is masking. I don't know exactly what the General Assembly will be open to. My hope is if they are not going to be okay with just the governor having the general authority over it, and admittedly they probably won't, that they will at least think about when a situation gets so serious that the state, whether it's me, whether it's the Department of Public Health, you pick, has the authority to do that. I certainly think a red county is one where if local government will not require indoor masking when you're out of your house, it's something that the state should be allowed to do. Certainly, at least during the Delta variant. But again, that's their call. We've had constructive conversations. They'll debate that in their own caucus. That's just my opinion on what I think is necessary. Bria Jones, WFPL.
You got it this time. Great job. Yes. With the extending of the state of emergency, possibly, what will that help keep intact in terms of like COVID policies, as well as what would that allow to happen more of through January 15th?
So we think a whole lot about masking, but there's a whole lot of what I would call belt and suspenders or foundational steps that we have taken over time. It's everything from workers' compensation for our frontline workers if they come down with COVID or a quarantine that they wouldn't otherwise have. It's recognizing doctors and nurses from other states that couldn't practice in Kentucky, and during this pandemic, they can. It's especially for seniors, allowing prescription refills at the pharmacy level so they don't have to go out. There's lots of boards where professionals or other folks have to come in person and re-up or do things. Those are all extended. There are a lot of different things like that we have put into place over time. It's also potentially necessary for federal funding. The president called a state of emergency in all 50 states, which gives us some security in FEMA funding. But normally, you would have to have a state of emergency under the Stafford Act and others to be able to get full reimbursement there. So it's important, and for future programs, we think it'll be important as well. Molly Lair, WLWT Cincinnati.
My question is about quarantine rules. There are a lot of districts that are struggling with hundreds of students who are home. They're seeing a lot of staff who are quarantined as well. So will that be part of the discussion this week, perhaps adjusting those quarantine rules?
I think that there could be some discussion on adjusting quarantine rules. I think when you adjust them, other things have to be in place, and those are all discussions that have to be made. It's certainly a lot easier to adjust those if you have universal masking. If you don't, it's very difficult. It also depends on the level of testing that's out there. And obviously quarantining and the amount of quarantining necessary depends on vaccination rates. I do expect for it to be a topic. I don't know if it would be specific legislation that comes out or the encouragement or the requirement of certain programs that we could develop out to lessen quarantine in certain situations. Let's see. Breon Martin from WDRB.
Thank you, Governor. With Kentucky's COVID surge, have any of these measures already been agreed upon with the General Assembly, or is this something you're asking for?
I think that we have seen certainly on, if I can, the belt and suspenders pieces, a lot of agreement, but the way that the legislation that they passed that was upheld by the Supreme Court makes us come back for basically everything that we have done and them to pass an act that approves many of those things moving forward. So I expect that there is a lot of agreement on a lot of things. Now, I think there's some very important things like masking that there may be disagreement on and will probably be a big part of the discussions. But we've had good talks, and we've even exchanged drafts of different things. So there's been a lot of exchange of information. And while I wouldn't say that there's been an agreement on specific legislation, there's been an agreement on what we need to do. There's been an agreement on the topics for the special sessions. And as opposed to some other special sessions, this is a have to, right? The law requires that if we want the state of emergency to continue, we have to do it. Kaylin Massey from WLKY.
My question was previously answered. The question I had was previously answered.
Thank you. Thank you, Kaylin. Kelsey Soto from WSAZ.
Governor, you have a long list of topics and situations and issues you'd like them to tackle in this special session. How likely is it, I mean, knowing that the masking is going to be a big chunk of that, how likely is it they'll be able to get through everything and handle all the funding and all the different issues by, let's say, Saturday?
I think that they will have certainly the opportunity to get through it in 5 days. Right now, I don't see any concern there. That doesn't mean that I'm going to get everything I want out of it. I'm pretty positive that I won't. But I think they will come to consensus early on about what they're willing to do. And knowing that a special session is extraordinary, knowing what the dollars are, I don't anticipate we'll go more than 5 days. And if we have to go a day or two beyond that, I imagine it'll be necessary. So I don't have any concerns there. I do think everybody is working in good faith. I do see them putting in the hours. Again, that doesn't mean we agree, but I think it means everybody's working hard and wants to get in and get out, but at the same time have real discussion. Sophia Miller from Lex 18. All right, Tom Kenny from WTVQ. For 2. Jack Bramer from the Courier Journal. I'm sorry, from the Herald Leader. Man, Jack, I can't believe I just did that to you. Did we lose everybody? Let's give it a minute. Now you call a reporter from the wrong newspaper, and what happens to you in the next article? We'll see. Okay, you want me to try one more? Al Cross, if you're on.
Thank you, Governor. Two questions, one procedural, one substantive. When exactly does the state of emergency end? We presume that's when the Supreme Court order becomes final, but Judge Shepard's also supposed to issue something. We've heard the 10th, we've heard the 13th, we're not really sure. That's the procedural question. The substantive question is, even under the law that they passed, you still have the authority to issue an emergency order for 30 days. If the legislature does not give you what you want and you think the state needs, would you still reserve the right to issue an emergency order that might go contrary to their wishes and hold it there for 30 days?
So Al, I think that the legislation prevents me from issuing a new state of emergency on the same topic. And I think it specifically mentions COVID-19 and any of its variants. If I have more flexibility there, I'm not aware of it in this situation. I think in a new emergency, we could, but if I believe there is flexibility there, it's something I would have to consider at the moment, at least on this pandemic. I don't believe there is that flexibility. But I have been wrong in the past, but at least that's how I read this statute at the moment. We also believe that this state of emergency ends September 10th at midnight, but we also believe that we're at a place where it's time to move, and there's a lot of uncertainty out there as the Delta variant continues to burn through Kentucky as hot and as quickly as it has. I think we also have Spectrum on the line.
Hi, good afternoon, Governor Beshear. I wanted to know, focusing on schools, I know one school district in Eastern Kentucky is having to pick up contact tracing in addition to the juggling of quarantines and stuff. Will there be any conversations about helping out school districts at this time during the special session?
I think there's going to be conversation about stabilizing funding. I think there's going to be conversations about testing. We'd really have to sit down and talk with school districts on the contact tracing side because they know their setup so well, and they're so directly responsible for the safety of their students. I get that it is taking every administrator all day long doing this right now. I've talked to them. I know them, and we can talk to them about what those additional needs are. I do think, though, that a lot of that is alleviated if you can say, instead of us having to go on NTI for the entire school district, or even just the school, that we know we have 4 positive cases in this 3rd grade class. If we get flexibility, that 3rd grade class could go NTI or could go remote learning, and the rest of the school would not. So I think that there are a number of different tools that are going to be considered that will cut down significantly on that amount of work. I will admit it's hard to move that from someone who is so knowledgeable, like those school administrators, and so directly tied into where those kids are at all times. So. All right, we're going to try Sophia Miller from Lex 18 again. All right, Sophia, I'm sorry, we can't hear you. If you want to send us the question, we will. I think Jeremy has raised his hand from WKYT for a follow-up, and we'll take a couple more of those if others would like to.
Thank you, Governor. Just wanted to ask about the current situation in Nicholas County that's prompted you to extend the state of emergency. Where is Nicholas County at right now, and where is FEMA at in terms of providing federal assistance?
So we don't have a final FEMA decision on individual assistance. We wished we did. And Nicholas County's disaster, which is awful, is a little different from many because we rarely see this level of devastation on what is almost a main street, you know, a core street inside of a city that is that has caused so much damage here. I don't know that we will necessarily need the extra days, but given how hard they've been hit, given people's desire for additional temporary housing, if we can, given the insurance company's stance towards these individuals, which I do not agree with, we just want to have some additional flexibility that's there. All right, I think that's it. We will begin this special session 10 a.m. on Tuesday. I want to thank legislative leaders, including Speaker Osborne, President Stivers, certainly all the leadership teams and everybody that helps them out on working towards this. I hope we can have a constructive, if we can, a low drama experience next week where we try to do the work and get as close to agreement as we can. But I will admit, and they know this, these are heavy decisions and a tough time when so much is on the line. So we will see you Tuesday morning. I hope everybody has a good but a safe Labor Day weekend. Remember, it's dangerous out there. This variant's spreading. If you are unvaccinated, you'll get it. And unfortunately, you're likely to get very sick. If you're vaccinated, you still very well may get it. So please be careful. Wear a mask when you're indoors, but outside of your home. And if you haven't, please, please, please get vaccinated. Thank y'all very much.
Wow. Okay, we'll talk about that later, but now this. Remembering our fallen heroes, 20-year-old Marine Corps Lance Corporal Riley McCollum was on his first deployment when he was killed in